While I was away on a business trip, my entitled parents rented out my house to strangers. When I rushed back, my mom said, "You weren't using it anyway." The renters had already thrown out my grandfather's war medals. I was numb until one said, "We paid 6 months up front. Not our problem." I had been away for exactly 23 days when my sister called me. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was in my hotel room in Seattle, half listening to the rain tapping against the window while I answered emails. Business trips weren't my favorite part of the job, but they paid well, and I had grown used to living out of a suitcase. At 36, I had built a life that I was proud of, stable, independent, and far away from the mess I'd left behind in Charleston. So when I saw Natalie's name flash on my phone, I hesitated before picking up. We weren't exactly close. She still lived near our parents, which meant she had been caught in their orbit longer than I had. She had learned to survive by appeasing them, but I had learned to survive by leaving. Still, a call in the middle of the day was unusual. I answered, "What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end, and then she sighed. "You need to come home." My heart did a strange, uneasy flip. "What?" Another pause. Then, "Mom and Dad rented out your house." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "What?" "They rented it out," she repeated, her voice tight, like she had been holding onto this information for too long. "To a family. They're already living there." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're kidding." "I'm not. They don't own my house." "I know." I sat up straighter, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Tell me this is some kind of mistake." "It's not," she said, and her voice cracked just enough for me to know she had been dreading this conversation. "I don't know how they did it. I don't know what they told the tenants. But Mom said they needed the money, and your house was just sitting there, and where are my things?" I cut in. Silence. My stomach turned to stone. "Natalie." She hesitated, and that was all the confirmation I needed. I stood up abruptly, sending my chair scraping against the floor. "What did they do?" "I don't know all of it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I heard Mom saying that the new tenants threw out some stuff. They cleared out the attic. My grandfather's attic." My hand started to shake. "They got rid of Grandpa's things?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't say anything. I was already booking a flight back to Charleston before we even ended the call. When I pulled up to my house 2 days later, my house, it didn't feel like mine anymore. There were cars in the driveway, a dusty red minivan, and an old pickup truck with a dent in the side. The grass had been trampled by too many feet, and the porch, which had always been bare except for a simple welcome mat, now had a pair of cheap plastic chairs and a wind chime hanging from the awning. I stared at it for a long time before stepping out of my rental car. My key didn't fit the lock. I knocked. There were voices inside, the sound of movement, and then the door opened. A man stood there, mid-40s, balding, wearing a stained t-shirt that stretched over a growing belly. He looked at me with mild impatience, like I was interrupting his evening. "Can I help you?" I took a slow breath. "This is my house." His brow furrowed. "What?" "This is my house." I repeated, my voice sharper. "I own it. I never rented it out. I don't know what my parents told you, but you need to leave." He frowned. "We have a lease." "No, you don't. We paid 6 months up front." A strange ringing filled my ears. "That's not my problem." A woman appeared behind him, holding a baby on her hip. She glanced at me, unimpressed, then turned to the man. "What's going on?" "Some guy's saying this is his house." She frowned. "We signed a lease." I could barely hear them over the pounding in my chest. My gaze moved past them, past the furniture that wasn't mine, past the unfamiliar shoes by the door, and then landed on something outside, something sitting by the curb. A trunk. An old, battered trunk with a broken lock. My grandfather's trunk. I walked past the man, past the woman, past their confused protests, and knelt beside it. The lid had been forced open, the contents dumped out. Papers fluttered in the breeze. Clothes, moth-eaten and fragile, were scattered across the pavement. The medals were gone. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the remnants of a life that had been discarded like garbage. A voice spoke behind me. "They took some stuff to Goodwill." I turned. The man shifted uncomfortably under my glare. "If it was in there," he said, "it's gone." The weight of it hit me all at once. The years, the history, the fact that I had been trusted to protect these things, to keep them safe. And now they are gone. A car door slammed. I looked up and saw them standing there, my parents. Diane and Richard. My mother had her arms crossed, an annoyed expression on her face, while my father stood beside her, hands in his pockets. Neither of them looked surprised to see me. "Honestly, you're overreacting," my mother said. I stood, slowly. "You weren't using it anyway," she added with a dismissive wave of her hand, like this was some minor inconvenience. "We figured." I don't remember what I said next. I don't remember much of anything, except the way my voice shook with rage, the way my father flinched when I stepped forward, the way my mother looked at me with genuine shock, like she truly hadn't expected me to be this angry. Like she hadn't expected me to care. The tenants were speaking again, their voices growing distant as my blood roared in my ears. You can't just kick us out. You have to understand, we paid. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about my grandfather. I was thinking about how he had survived a war, how he had trusted me with the things that mattered most to him, how he had looked me in the eye and made me promise to keep them safe. And I had failed him. I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms, my pulse hammering so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My mother's expression flickered with something close to exasperation, as if I were the unreasonable one here. My father still hadn't met my eyes, his mouth set in a tight line. I could see the way his jaw tensed, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, but he said nothing. I stepped closer. Where are they? My mother sighed. Where are what? The medals. She rolled her eyes. How should I know? You should know because you let strangers throw away Grandpa's things, I said, my voice dangerously low. You let them clear out my attic like it was a storage unit they had a right to. It was just sitting there, she said with a shrug like that justified it. We didn't think you'd care. Something inside me snapped. I turned abruptly, storming back toward the house. The tenants were still standing in the doorway, staring at me with equal parts confusion and irritation. The man, his name didn't matter, blocked my path. You can't just barge in here, he said. I met his eyes, unblinking. Move. He didn't. For 1/10 second, I seriously considered shoving him out of the way. Instead, I gritted my teeth and stepped around him, my shoulders brushing his as I pushed into the house that was supposed to be mine. It smelled different. That was the first thing I noticed. The faint scent of my old wooden floors had been overpowered by something artificial. Vanilla candles, maybe, or one of those cheap air fresheners that sprayed at random intervals. The furniture wasn't mine. The walls had new photos on them. A coat rack stood by the door, heavy with jackets that didn't belong to me. My stomach twisted. I moved through the house, taking in every violation. My bookshelves were gone. The old leather couch I had saved up for had been replaced with a beige sectional. The kitchen table, my kitchen table, the one I had refinished by hand, was missing entirely, replaced by something that looked like it had come from a discount furniture store. I turned sharply. Where's my stuff? The woman sighed. We put some things in the garage. I was already moving. I shoved open the door to the garage, my pulse hammering. The sight that met me made my breath hitch. Boxes. Stacks of them, some torn open, others barely taped shut. My belongings had been crammed into corners, buried under cheap plastic bins and random junk that didn't belong to me. I crouched down, yanking one of the boxes open. Papers, old books, clothes, some folded, some tossed haphazardly inside. I rifled through them with shaking hands. Not here. I moved to another box. And another. Still not here. The floor creaked behind me. I turned to see my father standing in the doorway. They're gone, aren't they? I asked. He exhaled heavily. Son, I stood abruptly. They're gone, aren't they? He didn't answer. For a moment, I thought I might actually hit him. I had never been a violent person, but the rage bubbling inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just about the medals. It wasn't just about the house. It was about all of it. Every broken promise. Every selfish decision. Every time they had taken something from me, because they had convinced themselves they were entitled to it. I stared at him, my hands trembling at my sides. Why? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Your mom thought, don't, I snapped. Don't put this on her. You let this happen too. His mouth opened, then closed. I shook my head. Do you even feel bad? Or are you just annoyed that I showed up and ruined your little scheme? That's not fair. I let out a cold laugh. Fair? Fair. I stepped forward, and for the first time, my father took a step back. You think it's fair that I worked my ass off to have something of my own, only for you to hand it over to strangers? I said, my voice rising. You think it's fair that Grandpa trusted me with his things, and now they're in some landfill because you two needed money? Lower your voice, he muttered. I ignored him. Tell me something, Dad. Did you even bother to look through his stuff before you let them throw it away? Did you even think about what those things meant? He didn't answer. That told me everything I needed to know. I turned and walked past him, back through the house, back toward the front door. My mother was still standing outside with her arms crossed, looking put out. The tenants were hovering nearby, watching with thinly veiled irritation. I stopped in the doorway. You have 3 days, I said to the man, my voice cold. Then I want you out of my house. His jaw clenched. We have a lease. I don't care. It's illegal. You're trespassing. I'll take this to court if I have to. His wife scoffed. That's not our problem. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. It will be. She shifted uncomfortably. My mother let out a dramatic sigh. Oh, for God's sake. I turned on her so fast she actually flinched. You stole my house, I said, my voice like ice. You stole my property. You let them throw away things that didn't belong to you. And you still think you're the victim? She had the audacity to look offended. I hope it was worth it, I said. Because I'm done. Something in her expression flickered. Don't be ridiculous. I didn't respond. I just stared at her for a long, heavy moment, memorizing every detail. Her carefully styled hair, the impatient tilt of her head, the way she always looked mildly inconvenienced when confronted with the consequences of her own actions. Then I turned and walked to my car. No one followed me. No one tried to stop me. I got in, shut the door, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. I drove without knowing where I was headed. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, my pulse still hammering in my ears. The streets of Charleston blurred past, familiar yet distant, like I was seeing them through a film of static. My grandfather used to say that anger was like fire. If you let it burn too long, it would consume you. I felt like I was already burning. I pulled into a gas station, more out of instinct than need, and parked at the farthest pump. My hands were still shaking when I cut the engine. For a long time, I just sat there, breathing, trying to shove everything down, rage, disbelief, grief. But it wouldn't go away. It sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and unmoving. My phone buzzed. Natalie. I ignored it. A minute later, another buzz. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face before finally picking up. What? A hesitant pause. Are you okay? I let out a bitter laugh. Take a wild guess. She exhaled. I just wanted to check. My grip on the phone tightened. Did you know? She was silent for a beat too long. I closed my eyes. You did. I didn't want to, she said quickly. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know they. What are they? I snapped. Rented out my house? Took my things? Trashed Grandpa's medals. She let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I pinched the bridge of my nose. I don't want your apology, Natalie. I want to know why you didn't tell me. I thought, she faltered. I thought maybe they'd come to their senses before you got back. I thought maybe it wouldn't be this bad. I stared at the cracked dashboard of my car, the old leather worn down from years of use. And when you realized it was this bad? She didn't answer. I let out a slow breath. You were afraid. Yes, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Natalie had spent her whole life trying to stay in Mom and Dad's good graces. She had learned early on that the best way to survive them was to not fight back, to go along with whatever self-serving logic they spun, because fighting was exhausting and never worth it in the end. I had learned the opposite. I had learned that fighting was the only thing that kept them from taking everything. But this time, they had taken something I couldn't get back. I stared blankly at the gas station sign glowing overhead, at the flickering fluorescent lights, at the worn pavement littered with stray receipts and cigarette butts. Are you going to press charges? Natalie asked softly. I clenched my jaw. I don't know yet. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, she said, I can try to find out where they took Grandpa's stuff. I gritted my teeth. It's gone. Maybe not. It's gone, Natalie. She inhaled sharply, like she was going to argue, but then let it go. I heard her swallow. I'm really sorry. I almost told her that wasn't enough. That no amount of regret could undo what had been done. But I didn't have the energy. I ended the call. I spent the night in a motel, even though I still had a room booked at my usual business hotel. Something about going back there, about sitting in a space that felt impersonal and temporary, made my skin crawl. I needed a place where I could sit and be angry without feeling like the walls were closing in. The motel was run down but quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of the last 24 hours. It still didn't feel real. I had left Charleston 3 weeks ago, thinking my life was stable, that my home would be waiting for me when I got back, that my parents, no matter how selfish they had always been, wouldn't go this far. And now, I had strangers living in my house. My belongings shoved into a garage like afterthoughts. My grandfather's medals, pieces of history, of his life, of him, lost forever. And my parents? My mother looked annoyed when I confronted her, like I was causing trouble for no reason. And my father? He hadn't said a word in my defense, hadn't fought for me, hadn't even pretended to be sorry. A deep, simmering anger settled into my bones, heavier than anything I had ever felt. They thought they could get away with this. They thought I would yell, maybe THR8 in them, but that in the end I would let it go. Because that's what I had always done. They took. I walked away. Not this time. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, the old light fixture above me flickering slightly. I didn't sleep. By morning, I had a plan. The first thing I did was drive to my lawyer's office. I hadn't seen Patrick in years, but when I walked in, he recognized me immediately. He was in his late 50s now, his hair graying at the edges, but his handshake was still as firm as I remembered. Didn't expect to see you here, he said as he gestured for me to sit. What's going on? I told him. His expression darkened as I spoke, his jaw tightening. By the time I finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Jesus, Sam. Yeah. He exhaled sharply. All right. First things first. Yes, what they did is illegal. No, the tenants don't have a real claim to the property. But evictions aren't simple, even when you have the law on your side. South Carolina courts are a mess, and since these people think they have a lease, they might try to fight it. I clenched my jaw. How long are we talking? Depends. Best case scenario, a few weeks. Worst case, months. I stared at him. I don't have months. I know. A heavy silence settled between us. Finally, he said, I'll file a notice of unlawful occupation today. That's step one. I nodded slowly. And my parents? Patrick sighed. That's up to you. I looked away, my fist clenching. I already knew what that meant. If I wanted to press charges for fraud, for illegal subletting, for theft, I could. But they were still my parents. Even after everything, they were still the people who had raised me, the people who had shaped so much of who I was, whether I wanted to admit it or not. And if I went down that road, there was no coming back. Patrick was watching me carefully. You don't have to decide today, he said quietly. But you do have to decide. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of it pressing down on me. I had spent my whole life letting them get away with things. Maybe it was time I stopped. I left Patrick's office with a tight knot in my stomach. The legal process had been set in motion, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, the weight of it all pressed down on me harder. I had a house I couldn't live in, a legal battle that could drag on for months, and parents who had once again taken from me without a second thought. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my hands gripping the steering wheel. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head, something he used to say when I was a kid, and I got too caught up in my own anger. You don't have to fight every battle, kid. But if you do, you fight to win. I wasn't sure if this was a battle I wanted to fight, but I knew I had to. I drove back to my house. The tenants were still there, of course. I half expected them to be smug when they saw me pull up, but the woman barely glanced at me as she carried a bag of groceries inside. The man, Jason, I had learned his name was, stood by the mailbox, shifting on his feet when he saw me step out of my car. I ignored him and walked up to the house. My house. Before I could knock, my mother's car pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly, watching me like she was assessing how much damage I had done since yesterday. She wasn't dressed like someone in crisis. No stress lines in her face, no rushed movements. Just another day for her. You need to let this go, she said as she walked up to me. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Excuse me. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. My entire body went rigid. She sighed, crossing her arms. I understand you're upset, but we did what we had to do. You had to steal my house. You weren't even here, she shot back. 3 weeks, Sam. The house was just sitting empty. And your father and I held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. She clamped her mouth shut, nostrils flaring. I stepped closer, lower my voice. You think I don't know what this is? You've been doing this my whole life. Taking. Deciding what's yours. Never asking. Never apologizing. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please, don't be dramatic. I laughed under my breath. You're unbelievable. She tilted her head. And what are you going to do about it? I stared at her. I knew what she was really asking. She wanted to know if I had it in me to fight back. To really fight back. For a second, I let myself imagine it. Filing a police report, dragging them into court, making them face actual consequences for once in their lives. I imagined the look on her face when she realized she had finally lost. But even now, even after everything, some stupid part of me hesitated. Because she was my mother. And no matter how much I hated her at this moment, some part of me still remembered being a kid, still remembered looking up at her, and thinking she was the strongest person in the world. I hated that. I hated that she still had that hold on me. You're going to lose this one, Mom, I said finally, my voice quiet but steady. I don't care what it takes. I'm taking my house back. I'm taking my life back. And you can either get out of the way, or you can go down with it. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to her car. She didn't look back as she drove away. I let out a slow breath and turned back to the house. Jason was still standing there, watching me warily. His wife peeked out from the door, her expression unreadable. 3 days, I said again, more to myself than to them. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this wasn't over. I didn't give them 3 days. I gave them one. After my mother drove off, I stood in front of the house for a moment, taking it all in. The audacity, the entitlement, the sheer nerve of these people, my parents, these renters, acting like I was the one inconveniencing them. No, not this time. I turned on my heel and walked back to my car. I had calls to make. By nightfall, the wheels were in motion. Patrick had filed the notice of unlawful occupation, but I wasn't about to sit around and wait for the courts to drag their feet. That was a slow, predictable process. I needed to apply pressure, and I knew exactly how. First, I found out where Jason worked. A few minutes on LinkedIn and a quick call to a buddy who did background checks for a living, and I had his employer's info. Turns out he worked in finance at a company that took fraud very seriously. A simple email to their HR department explaining that their employee was currently involved in an ongoing legal dispute regarding unlawful occupancy of a residential property was enough to raise eyebrows. Employers don't like that kind of liability. They don't like people who bring legal trouble to their door. And his wife? She ran a small business from home. An Etsy shop selling handmade jewelry and home decor. Cute, right? except her entire business was tied to an Instagram page and a Facebook group that had her home address listed for shipping inquiries. The home address was my house. I reported the address as fraudulent on both platforms. By morning, her shop's pages were suspended for suspicious activity. I wasn't done. I hired a private security firm to park outside the house. Not police, private security. They had no real authority to remove the tenants, but they looked official enough to make the neighbors curious. And people in this neighborhood talked. By noon the next day, I got a text from an old neighbor, Mrs. Fitzgerald, who had lived down the street since I was a kid. Mrs. Fitzgerald, sweetheart, why are there security men outside your house? Did something happen? Me, just some people who don't belong there. Handling it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, oh dear. I'll let the HOA know. Oh, I was counting on that. Within hours, the HOA was swarming. I had never liked them. They were nosy, overbearing, and had ridiculous rules about lawn decorations. But today, they were my weapon. The tenants weren't following HOA guidelines. Trash bins in the wrong place? Fine. Unapproved exterior modifications? Fine. Non-residents parking in the driveway? Fine. It kept adding up, piling onto the stress I knew was already cracking through their confident exterior. And then came the final blow. That evening, I got a call. Jason. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. I smirked and picked up. Yeah. His voice was tight. We need to talk. Oh, about what? You know what? The security guys, the HOA, my job. I feigned confusion. Your job? What does your job have to do with this? You know damn well what you did, he snapped. They put me on leave, pending an internal review. What the hell, man? I leaned back in my chair, feeling good for the first time in days. Sounds like your employer doesn't like dealing with people involved in legal disputes. Can't blame them. You're ruining our lives. I let the words hang between us, savoring them. Then I said, slowly, deliberately, so leave my house. Silence. Then, begrudgingly, we need time. You have until tomorrow. More silence. Then he hung up. By the next afternoon, they were gone. I watched from my car as they loaded their belongings into a moving truck, huffing and grumbling. His wife shot daggers at me every time she passed, but I just smiled. When the last box was packed, Jason walked up to me, face red with anger. Are you happy? I tilted my head. Ecstatic. His nostrils flared. You could have handled this differently. And you could have not stolen my house. His jaw tightened, but he had nothing left to say. I watched as they drove off. Then, finally, I stepped inside my house. It smelled wrong. The walls, the floors, the very air felt tainted by their presence. But they were gone. And now, it was time to deal with my parents. I didn't wait for them to come to me. I went straight to their house. My mother answered the door, her face twisting into an irritated frown the second she saw me. What now? I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. My father was in the living room, sitting stiffly on the couch. He looked tired. Good. I want my money, I said. My mother scoffed. Excuse me? You heard me. The rent money you took. Every cent. She crossed her arms. You're delusional if you think we're giving that back. I pulled out a folder from my bag and dropped it onto the coffee table. Then I hope you enjoy court. My father's eyes flickered to the papers. What is this? Legal filings. Fraud. Theft. Civil suit. Oh, and I had Patrick look into a few other things. Like the fact that you've been skimming money off Aunt Rachel's inheritance. My mother still went. Ah, there it was. You wouldn't, she said, but her voice had lost some of its bite. I smiled, slow and sharp. Would not. They knew me. They knew I had always been the one to walk away. The one who didn't push too hard. But this time I was done. You have two choices, I said, leaning back against the wall. Pay me back in full, or we go to court. And I will win. My father swallowed. My mother was already calculating, her mind spinning through the possibilities. Finally, her lips pressed into a thin line. Fine. 3 days later, the money was wired into my account. I sat in my empty house, feeling the quiet settle around me. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the house. It was about the fact that for the first time in my life, I had one. And they knew it. I leaned back against the couch, the ugly beige one they had replaced mine with, and let out a breath. For the first time in years, I felt free.